This was a trip down memory lane. I remember reading this crossover event. I wasn't like getting all the issues because even though I knew the crossover was happening at the time, I wasn't like following X-Men as close as I should.
Yeah.
I think I really started picking up collecting X-Men maybe about a year or so after this. And that was when we finally had a local comic shop in our area. So
yeah.
I was able to go, oh, okay, well, I'll go down there, grab and put a pool list together, which, boy, oh boy. I didn't realize at the tender age of 14 years old, the allowance can only go so far. But
your eyes get big when you'll save everything for me.
Yeah. Okay. I want this, and I want that, and then I want this. So I think I had like, I don't know, probably 4 titles on a pool list, and that really isn't a whole lot. I think I had Cable. Oh, I had Wildcats. I don't know if I had X-Men though. I don't think I had X-Men on the list. So yeah, me actually putting a pool list together happened after this. So I was picking up issues here and there whenever I could at the newsstand.
Yeah.
And but anyway, yeah. So I remember when this had started, and my friend had brought in, I think it was issue X-Men 25, which for the longest time, dude, I thought Wolverine 75. This is how long it's been since I read it, but I thought Wolverine 75 was where he got the the adamantium ripped out of him.
Yeah.
So that's what I always thought had happened, and then rereading this, it actually happened in...
That's just the aftermath, yeah.
Yeah, it happened in X-Men 25. Well, you know what? Screw all the formal intro. This is source material. That's Chris Armstrong over there. I'm Jesse Starcher. We're talking Fatal Attractions tonight. So are you ready, man? Are you ready to dive into this kind of...
Ready and willing.
All right, good deal. So, yeah, back to the story. I remember my buddy bringing in X-Men 25, and it was study hall, and I think I was either a freshman or a sophomore in high school. He was just casually collecting as well, and he's like, here, man, you need to read this. And I was checking it out. I was like, oh, dude, I've got to read this. And then, of course, we have one of the most iconic moments that happened in the 1990s, Marvel, especially in an X-Men book, to Wolverine. So... But yeah, Fatal Attractions, I didn't do a whole lot of research as to what went into this book ahead of time, like what caused them to put together this. I just know that Magneto and Charles Xavier have been not getting along for quite a while now.
Right.
Things have finally decided to come to a head. So at the time when this was coming out, were you picking up issues? I mean, I know you're a little bit younger than me, so I don't know what your collecting habits were.
I'd been into comics for probably 3 or so years. This is 93, I believe, is when this happens. Mm-hmm. And I was an X-Men reader off and on. I think by this time the animated series was probably on. I wasn't, getting every issue of Uncanny, every issue of X-Men, but I would get them occasionally, and I was kind of pretty well versed on what was going on. X-Force was a big deal to me, obviously, being the 90s comics nerd as I am. But when Liefeld left, I kind of lost interest in X-Force after a few issues. It just didn't have the same pop that it did, and I got really big into Image and Ultraverse and stuff around this time. But I was still getting the X-Men stuff. I know out of these 6 issues, I had Uncanny 304. These were all, hologram issues. So
I gotta talk about those covers.
Yeah. So that was something I wanted for sure when I was collecting these comics at 13. Mm-hmm. I don't remember if I had X-Men 25 or not. The only one I'm confident that I actually had was Uncanny 304. And then I would later find out about what happened to Wolverine, and I would go back later and get issue 25 of X-Men and Wolverine 75 and whatnot. I think reading these for this podcast is the first time I've ever read the X-Force, Excalibur, and X-Factor issues.
So you were actually jumping into them all in order.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, these covers, I just want to stop real quick and talk about these covers. The 90s they get a bad rep sometimes about gimmicks and all
From
that.
Some people.
Yeah, that's right. And they aren't going to get it from us because that's what drew us in. And that's what the holograms on each one of these covers, not to mention the wraparound covers filled with some spectacular art. I mean, there is, I mentioned to you guys offline, we got the Kubert boys on here, Adam and Andy. Yeah. We have Quesada, I think.
Capullo.
What's that?
A young Greg Capullo.
Yeah, Greg Capullo. Blew my mind when I saw that name there. Somebody had Quesada.
Yeah, he did the X Factor.
Did he? Okay. I was going to say somebody had Quesada credited for one. So Joe Quesada, this is... When I think 90s comics, I think art first. All right. Yeah, and then, I'll let the story see where the story takes me. But these covers were just phenomenal. And, of course, the holograms, which I think I have maybe 3 or 4 of these physical issues.
In 92, I believe, the Spider-Man 30th anniversary issues were coming out. And those were I remember those. I'm pretty sure those were the first hologram covers that comics had. The first ones I remember anyway.
Yeah. Was it the annuals or was it
No, it was just the regular
anniversary.
Issues. I think it was. I don't know if they did them all in the same month or if consecutively each month a different title had the hologram. I can't remember exactly how it worked out as far as that, but each issue of Amazing, Spectacular, Web of Spider-Man, and Spider-Man all had their own hologram cover, and they were all extra size. I think every issue had a poster as well. They were a big deal. Okay. And so X-Men followed suit, and the quality of the holograms on these covers are probably the best I've seen. The definition in the holograms and the detail it's really, really amazing. The Spider-Man ones look pretty cool, but they were kind of cloudy compared to these. So they really stepped their game up with these covers.
Yeah, they did. This is a event that happened quite often in the 90s when the X titles would cross over with each other. I went over to the wiki just real quick. We'll run them down here. Let me find it here. I have the publication history of the 1990s Marvel crossover events, and I'll just kind of run them down here. Yeah, well, a lot of these, it's not as extensive as I thought it would be, which it's the wiki, so there very well could be some stuff left out, but I recognize just about all of the names off of here. So here we go. Now, this isn't just X-Men. This is Marvel crossovers. Mm-hmm. So starting in 1990 to 1991, we have the Extinction Agenda. Then we have the Muir Island Saga. Then in 1991, we have the Great Infinity Gauntlet. Then we have Operation Galactic Storm, which has been mentioned a couple times on this podcast the last couple weeks. Not me either. It's we talked about the Kree Skrull War a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I listened to that.
Yeah, so we got.
Fan.
Yeah, that's right. And then we have Rise of the Midnight Suns, which I remember that. That's
we need to do one. We need to do a podcast on that around Halloween.
Oh, that would be perfect. Perfect stuff. Revenge of the Sinister Six. Then we have the Infinity War. 1992, Executioner's Song, 1992 to 1993, The Infinity Crusade, Maximum Carnage, which was a 6-hour podcast that I've done on here before. Good golly. Fatal Attractions, which is what we're covering tonight, which led into Blood Ties. That's one that I think I read that in trade paperback form way back in the early 2000s.
Reading this crossover really made me want to read Blood Ties because I believe it just comes right out of this into Blood Ties.
Yep, yeah. And then we have the Mystech Wars, which was a limited series. You ever heard of that one?
I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it, though.
For some reason, I'm thinking it had something to do with... Okay, well, here's...
I want to say it was the UK...
Exactly.
UK stuff.
Yeah, Warheads, Motormouth and Kill Power, Dark Angel, Death's Head 2, Knights of Pendragon, and Mystech Wars 1 through 4. We're getting into 19... Boy, I thought there was a lot less than this. Siege of Darkness, which apparently came after the Rise of the Midnight Sun. Child's Play, which I did not know... I don't think I've heard of that one. That was 1994... New Warriors,
that one.
Yeah, New Warriors, X-Force, and the Upstarts. Okay.
Between 94 and 96, I was kind of out of the loop. So
yeah, it's probably a good idea because shortly after that we have the Phalanx Covenant, and then the Clone Saga. Yeah, and then we have Legion Quest and Age of Apocalypse. Oh boy, that drew me in. I remember
that happened when I was out of it, but I went back and I actually got the trades, the Age of Apocalypse trades that had the gold foil covers, and they were super cool.
Oh yeah, DC versus Marvel in 1996. And then after Age of Apocalypse in 1996, we had the Onslaught Saga, Heroes Reborn, Operation Zero Tolerance, Heroes Return, The Hunt for Xavier, The Magneto War, and Magneto Rex in 1999. So there you go. That is a listing of all the crossover. I've covered, I know I covered Onslaught. I've covered DC versus Marvel, actually with Dean on here. And then we did, we're doing Fatal Attractions tonight, Maximum Carnage. We did Infinity Gauntlet. And I think that is it.
There's some stuff that's not listed, too. There's also a Midnight Suns crossover in between those two. I can't remember what it was called.
Okay.
After Midnight Suns, there was one that they had all the issues had the covers that were the black envelopes.
Oh yes.
Blade was became like a bad guy briefly. Midnight Massacre.
Okay. No, that is definitely
really
not
leaning into the horror elements.
Nice. Very nice. All right, well, let's get to it here. We got, standard source material fare. I will synopsis, and then we'll kind of break, talk about anything that we want to talk about, and then synopsis. I'm going to do 2 issues at a time. There's 6 total issues here. They ran through, so we went X Factor 92, X-Force 25, Uncanny X-Men 304, X-Men Volume 2, number 25, Wolverine Volume 2, number 75, and Excalibur 71. So we're really just sticking with the 6 core issues of this series. If you go, I think there's a trade paperback of Fatal Attractions that is huge, and it includes like
an omnibus. The one that I'm thinking of, the hardcover omnibus, has like 5 issues leading up to X-Men 303. Like it has issue 300, 302, something like that. And it's got some X-Men Unlimited issues in there that like are about Magneto.
Okay.
It's really expansive.
Yeah.
And the 6 issues that actually matter, really.
Well, before I guess we get into the story, I mean, did you have, when you grabbed these 6 issues, did you feel like, okay, I'm being thrown into something that I have no idea what's going on?
A little bit, but I mean, that's X-Men in general.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I always say, like, sometimes people that I know, like, hey, my kid wants to start reading comics and they really like, Spider-Man or Wolverine. And like, what's the first one? And it's like, don't try to do that. Like,
it's
comics
tough.
are kind of not as much now, but especially in the like leading up through the 90s and early 2000s, they were designed where you could jump in at any time and you could get a pretty good grasp of what was going on. It's a little harder. Like now they don't really read the same way. It's probably not as easy to do, but especially like in the 90s when I was reading comics, like you want the whole story, obviously, but if you don't have access to it, you could still jump into almost any issue and they would give you the information you need to enjoy that comic.
Yeah, you could infer. I think the bulk of what's probably scary about the mutant books, any X Factor, X-Men, it's the characters. I mean, there are so, especially in this series, you are going to get exposed. If you just get these 6 issues, you're going to get exposed to at least 20 characters.
Yeah.
Because you have 3 teams.
And that's just the heroes.
Sure. Yeah, that's just the heroes. And you got 3 teams of people. And there's even one guy in here I actually didn't even know existed. I have no idea. He showed up in X Factor. He's that bounty hunter guy.
Oh, random.
Yeah, I didn't even.
90s as hell.
I have no idea who this dude is. Let's go ahead. We'll get into this here. I'll do the synopsis of the first 2, and then we'll get into it. Anything else you'd like to say, sir?
No, I'm ready to roll.
All right. So bear with me. I tried to keep the synopsis as truncated as possible. So it might take me about 5 minutes, but we're going to get through it, and hopefully you'll have a good understanding as to what happened. So X Factor 92, titled The Man Who Wasn't, written by, co-plotter Scott Lobdell and pencils and co-plotter Joe Quesada. And then we have J.M. DeMatteis with script. A group of deadly dedicated mutants serving the memory of a presumed dead Magneto called the Acolytes. And I'll go ahead and give you their names. I have no idea about powers, but we have Javits, Spore Senyaka, which he looks like almost kind of like something to do with like Omega Red with the whole tendrils and stuff like that. Their apparent leader, Fabian Cortez, Scanner, and Frenzy. All right. These acolytes attack a hospital, killing defenseless humans, or flat scans as they call them. After the carnage, X-Factor, which comprised of Quicksilver, Alex Summers, in other words, Havoc, Polaris, Strong Guy, Wolfsbane, Multiple Man, and their liaison, or government liaison, Val. This X-Factor, and I don't know if the first iteration of X-Factor worked alongside the government or not, but at some point they did. And here they are. They're kind of like working alongside the government. So anyway, X-Factor is called in to investigate this, this carnage at this hospital the Acolytes caused. Now, the Acolytes actually had at some point abducted Val, and they implanted something in her in order to be the kind of use her to lead X-Factor into a trap. Okay. They use her to draw X-Factor to a military facility in order for the Acolytes to ambush them. It turns out this was all a plan the Acolytes put in motion to allow Fabian Cortez the opportunity to woo the son of Magneto. Now, here's the thing, folks. The Acolytes are devoted to the ideology that Magneto has brought forth about how mutant kind is superior to humankind, okay? And they take it to some really absurd, violent levels, hence this whole attack on this hospital. And anybody who is somehow affiliated or in the bloodline of Magneto, they want to bring them into the fold if they can. So when Quicksilver refuses to join the Acolytes, they immediately retreat and escape. At the end of the issue, the only thing that the battle has wrought is a severe distrust for their government liaison friend Val. When she confesses at the end that she was the one that led them there, but not of her own doing, the team seems to have had enough of her deception in the past as well. So my guess is she's been kind of shady, and they kind of haven't trusted her off and on, at least up until this point. That's right, dude. That's right. Now, while she's crying at the end of this, she's saying she still considered them friends. And Quicksilver, oh damn, Quicksilver says, "Some of my best friends are mutants." He's got this in quotes, like this is what the humans say. Some of my best friends are mutants. Ah, Valerie, how very typical of a flat scan. So yes, and one of the things that the Acolytes, when they left, they were saying, are like, we came here, we may not have won this battle, but we've at least planted a seed. And then you see at the end of this issue that that's probably what happened, because Quicksilver is now actually using the same terminology that the Acolytes were at the beginning, calling humans flat scans. So, all right. X-Force 25, back to front, written by Fabian. Oh boy, I had this.
Your guess is as good as mine.
It's Fabian Nicieza. Fabian Nicieza. Boy, I had it pronounced earlier today, and I just, completely lost it. But anyway, Fabian Nicieza and Greg Capullo, and a lot of anchors here. So let's do a real quick roll call on the X-Force here, all right? Because the X-Force, we're 25 issues into X-Force, and the team's a little bit changed, not a whole lot, but you'll notice that one person is definitely missing. So roll call on the X-Force at the beginning of this issue: Cannonball, Boomer, Feral, Warpath, Richter, Shatterstar, Siren, and Sunspot. Okay? Now, as the team is heading back to their base, a mysterious figure haunts their headquarters. Who could it be? I don't know. Look at the cover of the issue. But mysterious figure haunts their headquarters. After incapacitating most of them, it is revealed their leader has returned after apparently a long absence. Cable is back. Soon, one of the most powerful of Acolytes appears, Exodus. Exodus requests Sam and Richter to join him to the Acolyte Mutant Sanctuary Avalon. Sam agrees so long as they can take some of the others. By the way, Sam Guthrie is Cannonball here. Sam agrees so long as they can take some of the others. Now, Sam has just actually set a trap to give the rest of the team the lowdown on what's going on. And I think one of the big things here is that they're trying to kind of show that, Cable's been away for a while. Sam took lead of the X-Force, and he's taking initiative here, like a leader should. So Cable and the rest of the team head to space, and it turns out Avalon is Cable's old sentient ship called Grey Malkin. Cable and the others wait for the right time to attack Exodus. And when they do, Cable plans to blow the ship, but Cannonball says no. They plan to stay there as Magnus. Yes, Magneto is alive and the leader of the Acolytes here. Magneto is offering a safe haven to mutants. Unbeknownst to them, Cable has them all teleported, has all of his team teleported off the ship and remains on Avalon. Cable then comes face to face with Magneto, and Magneto royally messes him up. I mean, bad. Leaving him a barely breathing heap of scrap and skin. Luckily, he is able to activate his teleport in a disheveled mess to get to the rest of the X-Force. So at the end of this, he has won the battle, as Magneto is not able to get the young mutants as his followers on Avalon. So now Magneto turns his sights on the X-Men.
A lot happening.
Yeah, yes, it is. You have the floor, sir. I mean, what do you think here?
Well, the first thing that kind of pops out is the art is Joe Quesada on X Factor and Capullo on X-Force, who, we're still pretty young, especially Capullo.
Oh, yeah.
But within, the next 6-7 years, they were going to be like two of the biggest names in comics. And Capullo still is one of the biggest names as far as art. Quesada doesn't really do much anymore outside of like...
he becomes a big executive at Marvel.
Yeah, he's more of a guiding force for like the full Marvel line for a while. I think he's still at Marvel, but I don't know what his position is currently. He was, really instrumental in the early 2000s when he became editor-in-chief of kind of like revitalizing Marvel when it had gone through kind of a down period in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it says here he was at his retirement the longest serving Marvel editor-in-chief other than Stan Lee. So, yeah, he retired from doing that. He became editor-in-chief in 2000 and left his editor-in-chief role in January of 2011. So apparently he wasn't there. Well, no, that's 11 years. That's a long time. Yeah. Quesada, I mean, dude, when I think of 90s comics, Joe Quesada's up there, especially when you're talking about some of the more signature art. One of the first things that they have listed here was his run on Ninjak and Valiant.
Yeah.
And I can remember some of those covers and some of the stuff that he did there, which was just damn amazing. So, yeah, we're talking 1993 here. And Cap, I mean, oh my gosh, Capullo with his run on Spawn. And
I guess this would have been pre-Spawn. McFarlane was probably still doing Spawn at this time.
Yep.
And when he went to Spawn, he was really more of like, I mean, I wasn't reading those books. I never really was never that into Spawn outside of the very, very early issues. Mm-hmm. But I would see the issues, all the time at the shop, and he really was like channeling McFarlane, trying to have like a McFarlane look to his art for a long time.
Yep.
And as he's grown more and more, like he's got his own style now, more so than trying to look like somebody else. Like his stuff on Batman.
That's what I was going to say. He's on Batman.
It's really amazing.
Yeah, I remember seeing him on Batman here recently. Is he still pinning Batman, or is him and Snyder?
His run on Batman ended, and then he did a big crossover, I guess, last year called Metal. That's
okay.
What it was.
Yeah, DC's
Dark
Metal.
Knight's Metal or something like that.
Yep.
And while I thought the book itself was really bad, and I like Snyder for the most part, but I thought the story was pretty bad. But his art made it worth reading just because he kind of got to let loose and do a lot of, crazy creatures and stuff like that. It was really good. It was really cool looking. I just didn't really like the story. Back to X Factor.
Yeah, I don't know who the hell Random is. He just seems like some kind of bounty hunter guy.
I only remember him as being an X Factor adjacent character who would show up sometimes. It seemed like to me he was sort of let's take Lobo and give him the T-1000's powers.
Oh, okay, all right.
Except he can make guns instead of just blades.
Okay.
Because I remember I can just remember images of him getting shot through with power blasts, and there would just be like, a hole burst through his stomach, and then it would just meld back together. And he could, like, his hands, he could transform into like big cannons that would shoot. And he's just got that like lazy biker, early 90s biker look with the shades and the skull cap and the cigarette. He just kind of screams 90s. I'm normally all for 90s characters, but I don't really have any affection for Random.
The coolest thing that stuck out to me, I mean, X Factor 92, it seems like they were just kind of setting up this whole distrust with Val, and we've got to cross over all of the teams somehow. So we got to give all the teams something to do. X Factor gets called in. They have their first, I guess, the first run-in with the Acolytes here, at least in this story. They actually kind of win the battle, and there's nothing to be said, really. Even Quicksilver turns them down. And like I said, there might be something to say about him, the Acolytes, sowing that seed of distrust, because they are brought to that military facility, and there's like a ton of Sentinels that the government has co-opted, or Project Wide Awake, I think is what it was called. And
I think so.
Yeah, there were all these Sentinels just in case the mutant threat, so mutants and humans, they're not getting along. The Acolytes are definitely not helping anything out as they're going around and they're killing humans. But okay,
right, and in the most despicable manner, because it opens with them attacking. It was a nursing home, right?
I think it was a hospital.
Hospice, and just slaughtering patients and medical staff in a manner that was like they're religious zealots, basically. Mm-hmm. Killing in the worst manner possible, I guess, in order to show humanity that they're all the same to them. They're basically like putting down dogs. Yeah.
This battle between the Acolytes and X Factor at that government facility, there's one thing I took away from it, and that is multiple man killing. It's
I
like
can't remember the character either.
It's like this alien looking. Let me just describe it here, because I got it in front of me. If you don't know much about multiple man people, if there's some kind of impact to his body, he can pop off a clone of himself. Okay, hence the term multiple man. He can, clones. If he just hits himself in the head or in the arm or whatever, a clone will pop up, and it makes him a formidable foe when you got thousands of himself battling somebody. So there's this crazy green alien, almost, I wouldn't say brood. They're not really a brood, but they definitely look, they're out there. Okay. This alien thing, whatever this person's name is. And it's attacking multiple men, or at least one of the multiple men. This is the most gruesome thing. So this alien starts burying his thumbs into one of the clones' eyes, and he's screaming, "Oh my gosh, it hurts." And at that very same time, the only thing that he can do is he takes his fist and he shoves it into this alien's mouth, punching it in its throat, and at the same time creating a clone. And the clone pops up inside this thing's body and explodes it. And I thought that was probably, out of this whole, I don't know. If we're talking cool kills, we're not there yet. But I'll tell you right now, this is kind of setting the tone.
The viciousness.
Yeah, there you go. Multiple man just one of the clones pops up in this guy's body, and the alien just kind of explodes. Oh, he says, "But you didn't leave me any choice." But anyway, I thought that was probably one of the coolest things out of here. Anyway, anything else on X Factor 92?
No, I think that's pretty much it on that issue. But all of the issues, with the exception of maybe Uncanny and then X-Men and maybe Wolverine, they don't really flow as one story. They're kind of related, but if you didn't read this X Factor issue, it wouldn't matter as far as reading the entire story of Fatal Attraction.
Really, what you're following here is the Acolytes.
Yeah.
And their interaction with mutant, the X teams, because next up is going to be an X Factor, or excuse me, X Force 25. It's the Acolytes versus X Force, the Acolytes versus the X-Men. Really, this whole seed of distrust that doesn't follow throughout the rest of the story. It's
that's
really
something that I'm sure they picked up on in X Factor as things went along. But
now how about X Force 25 with Cable coming back to the X Force? Now I assumed that it had been a while since they'd seen him. They seemed awful surprised, so I assume Cable was off doing his own thing. And
I think it was probably. Was it Extinction Agenda was the previous one? Executioner's Song, I believe.
Oh, we're getting a Strife there. Isn't that Strife?
Yeah, Strife was the villain, and which he is the nemesis of Cable. And I believe that was probably when that was over, is when Cable probably left the X-Force team. I couldn't swear to it, but that seems about right.
Okay.
So that would have been about a year that he had probably been gone from the X-Force book.
Yeah, it was funny how the X-Force team comes back and they're going throughout the headquarters. Oh, this shaded figure is going around taking them out, and I'm like, he's on the cover.
Right. It's hard to do that in comics when you know they're going to be like, no, he's going on the cover because it's going to sell better.
Exactly. That's what it was about.
Put him on the cover. We're going to make a big deal that this is his return.
Exactly.
But they still write it in a way that maybe you won't know who it is.
Mm-hmm. So what'd you think of X-Force 25?
I was going to say it's a solid. It's probably one of the better ones, I think, in the crossover. Even though there are multiple inkers on Capullo, which kind of makes it look like different artists, I think it might be the only one besides X Factor that has the same artist throughout the entire issue. A lot of these books, because I guess they're double-sized or whatever, have multiple artists, and it kind of is jarring, especially that Uncanny X-Men issue. But this one is pretty uniform in its look. I'm a big X-Force fan, especially the original team with Cable and Cannonball. Cannonball is kind of famously the only Kentuckian in Marvel or DC history that I'm aware of.
Nice.
So I've always kind of liked Sam Guthrie's and him kind of stepping up and proving himself as a capable leader, and he proves it to Cable even in this issue. That was a nice touch.
Yeah, Cable was shrouded in such mystery, even to his own team. And I think that was probably one of the big takeaways from this issue, is because when he shows up, it's kind of like him and Cannonball have really got to have a sit-down heart-to-heart. Cannonball's like, look, Cannonball's had enough of his crap. Stop, stop being this shady guy. And there is like a full page where Cable's like, all right, here you go. And he lays it all out there for him. And I think that was one of the big draws to Cable for me, was like, oh man, who is this guy? I know time travel's involved. He's supposed to, that was one of the big things back then. But yeah, there is like almost a full page where I'm looking at
basically him, listing off all of the different points. I think this is probably all stuff that had been slowly revealed, like in the Cable miniseries and in other appearances he's had. But here he just lays it all out pretty much for the team.
Just like you said, we had the whole thing with Strife, which made a lot of people, they didn't trust Cable.
And Strife is, I don't really know, I can't remember all of the backstory for Strife, but he looks like, I don't know if he's a clone, but he looks exactly like Cable. So.
Yep. The ending of this, where Magneto gets a hold of Cable and just shreds him and leaves him there. I'm like, dude, Cable's dead. I mean,
he looks it.
Half his body is metal. So if you've never seen Cable, how do I say this without even going any deeper? Techno-organic virus and this and that and the other.
He's got the metal arm, and it's not a robot arm. That's part of his makeup. His arm is been taken over by technology. Half of his body is basically a cyborg. He's basically a cyborg. So
and he somehow lives after this attack from Magneto, is able to get out of there. At the end of this issue, you don't know what shape Cable's in. So
also, I assume, because in the X Factor issue, the Acolytes are all talking about Magneto as if he's dead.
Yeah.
He had supposedly died in, I guess, X-Men number 3, one of the early issues of the Jim Lee Claremont run of X-Men. And I guess he hadn't been seen since then. And we discover, I guess, in this issue that he's still alive, and it leads to his confrontation with Cable.
I'll bring that up in my notes here in a few. But yeah, they had... Asteroid M had crashed, and I think we find out that one of his acolytes is not exactly as faithful as he should have been. So, what else was I going to say? What do you think of this Exodus character?
I remember Exodus as being kind of a big deal around this time, mostly because of this and the Blood Ties storyline, which followed it, where he was the bad guy in the Avengers X-Men crossover. So I have a fondness, I guess, for Exodus, but I don't really know much about him. I just have those memories of him as kind of a big villain, briefly in the X-Men lore.
Well, let's take a look here at the old wiki, because I'm right there with you. I don't know much. While
you're looking that up, I do want to kind of point out, this Cable image of him, getting wrenched apart by Magneto is kind of stealing the thunder of Wolverine or of X-Men 25 in retrospect. Because when you look at that, how could you not think, well, he could just do that to Wolverine too? Wolverine's metal. So we kind of get a preview in this issue of what Magneto's capable of.
Well, you hit it on the head there earlier. You talked about vicious, how vicious this series is. Here, it's not letting off the gas at all. I mean, when Cable was being wrenched apart by Magneto, you're just like, geez Louise,
it's like, how could he survive?
Exactly. Exodus. Okay. So, yeah, I don't know much about this guy, but he first appeared in X Factor 92. So that was his first appearance. I did not know that.
This one was his first one. Oh, so X Factor 92 was the first part of Fatal Attractions, right?
Yeah. If you look at that X Factor issue, it's funny because they're flying, like they're heading to that government installation. Exodus is like hovering in the air. They look at him for like a quick second, and they're like, I remember the dialogue is something like, it looked like he had something to say, and then he just flies off. So he appears, but I mean, it's like real brief,
right?
Very brief.
He's just there to make an appearance.
Yeah, but
he looks cool.
Yeah, he does. You're like, oh, who could this guy be? So this is what I wanted to get to. I wanted to figure out what he can do.
What he can do.
Yeah. Okay, so he's got telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, immortality, okay, superhuman physical attributes, accelerated regenerative healing factor. So he's pretty damn formidable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's definitely a strong character, created by Scott Lobdell, Joe Quesada. Yeah. Okay, so he is right now Magneto's right-hand man, okay? So that's Exodus is going to pop up back here in a few. I just want to get our listeners to understand who Exodus is. So, All right. Anything else on X-Force 25 before we get to the next couple synopsises?
I think that's it. The Cortez revelation is not in this issue, is it? I'm looking.
No, I think I have that coming up here in the. Cool. Yep. Yeah, we have that in X-Men 304.
All right. Move along.
All right. Here we go. Uncanny X-Men number 304. It's titled For What I Have Done. Written by Scott Lobdell. Penciled by John Romita Jr. I love these names. I'm just like, yep, recognize that name. In this issue, we get a look at the tragic origin of Magneto, the death of his daughter, and the attack by humanity turning him into the villain he is today. Aiming to protect mutant kind from the horrors of humanity, Magneto turns a page and becomes what we see now. We also see that Fabian Cortez is out as leader of the Acolytes. Magneto has remembered how Fabian left him on Asteroid M to die. Back down on Earth, with the recent death of Colossus's sister, Ilyana, or Magic, as some people may know her as, her friends prepare for her funeral. This event brings X-Force, the X-Men, and X-Factor together. You can see that throughout this issue that Professor X blames himself, and Colossus is in rather a state of denial, actually going to the lengths of destroying his memories of his sister. The real event is when Colossus explains to Xavier, I did not fail you. You and your dream failed me. Worse, it failed Ilyana. And for that, I will never forgive you. So that's important because you can see right now that Colossus is really, number one, he's having to deal with the fact that his sister's dead. Number two, the fight that he's been fighting for the last however many years for Professor Xavier, he feels that it's really betrayed him. So you can kind of see that's the genesis of where we're about to go here. In typical Magneto fashion, he crashes a funeral. Magneto appears, and he is more powerful than ever. So everybody's like, oh my goodness, Magneto's alive. Well, yeah, he's alive, and he is pissed. He actually, in front of everybody, he kills one of his own acolytes, Senyaka, for killing the innocents at the hospital. So a little bit of retribution there. But he is still planning to wreak havoc on mankind as he believes mutants are still threatened by humanity. A fight breaks out. Magneto is enraged and threatens to kill anyone that does not join him. Rogue, this was pretty crazy. Rogue jumps up and grabs Magneto by the face and kisses him. Now, if you guys know anything about Rogue, if you touch Rogue, if she comes into any type of physical contact, she drains the power and almost somewhat the life force out of this person. So she grabs Magneto and full on kisses him, trying to end this fight quickly. She makes contact. Everything looks good, but it hardly affects him. I mean, Magneto is just like, yeah, I'm not the same man I was.
That's not going to work anymore.
Nope. He's so powerful that doesn't do anything. Nothing happens. Everyone is almost kind of incapacitated until they come up with this brilliant idea to focus all their power on Bishop. Now, Bishop, speaking of time travel, another Spider-Man from the future, one of his power sets is that he can absorb, I think it's either kinetic energy or he can basically absorb energy and rechannel it. So everybody focuses their power on Bishop, and they start hitting him with everything they got, and Bishop unleashes it on Magneto. Bishop appears to actually have the upper hand when, boom, heel turn, Colossus Colossus comes up and nails Bishop from behind, and then picks up Magneto and explains to everyone that he believes it's better to join and serve Magneto instead of actually staying here with Xavier and the rest of the team. But before this can be done, Xavier rises and locks in mental combat with Magneto, forcing Magneto to use his own powers, rise up to Avalon. So in these panels, you see Magneto and Xavier just kind of rising up into space. And what you find out is Xavier is making Magneto use his own powers to do this. So they rise up into space, and then he has Magneto go back up into Avalon, and then he sends Avalon across space. Yeah. Now,
kicks it like a can.
Ending the battle, but clearly the war continues. X-Men Volume 2, number 25. Now, we're definitely breaking after this, okay? Because this is where shit hits the fan. I don't know how far he sent Avalon into space. Wasn't too far because Magneto's back.
Yeah.
X-Men Volume 2, number 25. This is Andy Kubert on the cover here. And this is titled Dreams Fade, written by Fabian Nicieza and penciled by Andy Kubert. Bringing Avalon and his acolytes back in orbit, Magneto unleashes a EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, plunging the world into darkness and causing chaos and death all over the globe. Xavier now realizes how dire the situation is and explains to his X-Men it's now a battle for survival against Magneto, and it's no holds barred, brother, as he plans to lead the team to face him. Believing there is a very high chance he won't come back, he leaves some of his students on the ground to carry out his dream. As his team infiltrates the ship, they activate the teleportation systems and send all of the acolytes off of the ship. So they don't even battle the acolytes here. They're just like, okay, boom, transport them, they're out. And the only person that's left is Magneto. Now, when Magneto sees this, Magneto's like, all right, I've had enough. And he barrels and finds Xavier and the rest of the team and proceeds to battle them. Most of the X-Men are able to occupy him, while Jean and Professor X jump into Magneto's mind. There they see that Magnus is confusing his own life's events in his head. Trying to correct this, Jean Grey and Xavier try to make Magnus face what he's doing to himself. Now, as Magneto deals with the psychic onslaught of these two, he must also fend off the physical assault from the rest of the X-Men. When Magneto attempts to kill his own son, Quicksilver, Wolverine makes his move to try and kill Magneto. While bleeding badly, Magneto decides to end this repeating confrontation with Logan, Wolverine, once and for all, by laying him out and ripping the friggin' adamantium out of Logan's body through his skin. In a fit of rage, Xavier confronts Magneto and psychically renders him in a vegetative state. The battle ends with the X-Men trying to get their butts back home, while Colossus again decides to stay on Avalon with Magneto to try and carry out Magneto's dream. Let's talk about Uncanny X-Men 304 first. What we have here is, I guess, watching one of our faithful team members in Colossus turn their back on the X-Men in order to follow Magneto.
Yeah, that image, props to John Romita Jr., who I'm a huge fan of. I actually hated his art around this time when I was younger. I really didn't like his art, and I would kind of avoid stuff that he was doing, with the exception of this one and probably a select few others. I didn't really become a fan of his until his Thor run with Dan Jurgens in the late 90s, and I've kind of been a huge fan of his ever since then. And in retrospect, I don't really know why I didn't like his art here, because it's outstanding. But that image of Colossus throwing that power bomb on Bishop's back, kind of blindsiding him, that was burned into my brain, for a long time. One of the X-Men turning on the group and siding with the Magneto. It was a huge moment for me when I was a kid reading this book.
And this isn't going to be the end of our story with Colossus, but, I mean, you think of the core members of the X-Men, You think Colossus.
There's the original 5 who started the team, and then there was for 20 years, or probably a little less than 20 years. That was it.
Yeah.
And then came Giant Size X-Men #1 with Wolverine, Thunderbird, Nightcrawler, Storm, I guess, and Colossus. Like, those are basically the second big five of the X-Men, and he was a constant, for years up to this point.
Can you blame Colossus here?
Well, yes.
Okay. All right.
If Dean had been here, we could have argued about Magneto being right.
I know. I so wanted to say that tonight.
But,
damn it.
He couldn't make it. That's fine. I'm going to choose to believe it's not because he was afraid to defend his position. But honestly, no. It's hard to blame him. I mean, he's at a point, like, probably the lowest point in his life. His younger sister had succumbed. It's not spelled out explicitly, but I believe the legacy virus was what Strife set loose in Executioner's Song, right?
Okay, it's been a while since I read that, so I know the legacy virus is mentioned in here. So
right, and it was a big deal, and I guess it was. The X-Men have always been an allegory for the way minorities were oppressed in the U.S., civil rights, gay rights, etc. I believe the legacy virus was intended as an analog to the AIDS virus, although I don't know that that's ever been spoken out.
I can remember reading the pages of X-Men and the legacy virus coming up and getting that. I was getting that impression as well. I
don't know if that's been addressed before and been confirmed or whatever, but that's what I've always kind of assumed. It kind of ravages the mutant community. There was no cure, and so Peter has lost his younger sister. There's nothing he can do to see. He can't punch it away, which is kind of what Peter's good for. Mm-hmm. So I can see him being disillusioned and feeling like Professor X has failed him, in different ways. But yeah, I don't understand joining up with Magneto.
Yeah.
But it works for the book. I mean, you can't get too much into his headspace. You don't know what he's thinking or what he's feeling. Maybe he's had some. They also address in, I think, issue 20 or in the Excalibur issue.
Yep.
That they have a theory as to why he would do that, which is that he's dealing with a brain injury.
Yeah, some kind of head trauma, which I don't know if that's mentioned at all. And
I don't think it's mentioned until the Excalibur issue.
Yeah.
But maybe it was something that was well known in continuity at the time if you were a reader. Maybe you would have just kind of already known that. But
okay.
Either way, huge moment for the X-Men in the 90s.
Yeah, at some point, the student has to rise up above the teacher, or there's the student versus the teacher, and then the students finally decided, okay, well, your ways have never they haven't worked for me. Yeah, it's not working
anymore.
Exactly. So at least I can see that situation a lot of times in many people's lives. Now, to ally yourself with somebody who goes to the extremes, granted, Magneto doesn't condone the killing that Synaka did, the ruthless,
right.
But
see, that's another thing. He kills Synaka basically because he was responsible, along with the other acolytes, of all the murder in the X Factor issue. But he literally says, if I had been here, I would have condoned it. He's saying, I would have cheered you on murdering those humans. But he also says, since you didn't have my permission, I'm going to murder you.
Oh, wow. So okay, never mind.
He's psychotic. He's crazy.
My bad.
He's insane.
Yeah, wow. I thought he was like, okay, you can't do that, but no, it's.
No, I'll look and see if I can find the exact language, but that's how I remember reading it. Was he basically said, that was great. I would have totally condoned that if I had been here, but since you thought I was dead, you didn't have my permission. It doesn't make sense.
No,
it doesn't even. So then he murders Synaka, or at least apparently he does.
Well, Xavier is at his wit's end with Magneto. Or when he sends Magneto up into Avalon and then sends Avalon further into space. So it says, and whereas Magnus was often given to displaying the full range of his powers, Professor Charles Xavier was always less inclined until this moment. Forgive me for what I'm about to do. You ain't even started yet. And with that, Xavier magnetically hurls Avalon into space, lacking the courage, the resolve to take the life of the man who he knows will certainly return and once more threaten the entire world. So he knows he's coming back.
Yeah.
He knows he's coming back. So
one more thing on this issue. I spoke earlier about how this issue has several different artists. John Romita Jr., Jay Lee, Chris Sprouse, Brandon Peterson, Paul Smith, with the exception of Paul Smith, who I would say is average. I like most of these other artists. I didn't like Jay Lee at this time. His style evolved a lot over the years to where I was a bigger fan of his. But his pages are like a flashback.
Yes, and I was talking to Dean about this because we were talking about the issues. You can clearly tell the art changes when Magneto starts flashing back and remembering who he was. And I immediately recognized who it was. It's like, that's either Jay Lee or I almost thought it was Mark. Is it Teixeira or Teixeira?
Mark Teixeira, I can see that too, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, okay, it's either one of those two, but I couldn't find the credits for the life of me to figure out.
They're actually at the very end of the issue, like one of the last pages.
That makes sense.
But then there's like Chris Sprouse, who I like. He did Tom Strong, and he's done a lot of different things over the years. The problem comes when like it jumps from this different artists in the same scene, and they're jumping. I guess it might have had to do with John Romita. You know, he was like, I want to make sure I'm doing this page, because I really like the spread. So they were just finding other artists to fill in the pages he wasn't going to have time to get finished before it was supposed to be out or whatever. So that's a little jarring and annoying, especially when nobody else looks like John Romita Jr. He's definitely got a style all his own.
Signature.
Ron Garney is the guy who the only guy that I think kind of has a similar style to Romita Jr. So it is a little annoying when it jumps from Paul Smith to John Romita Jr. from one page to the next. But that's really a kind of a small complaint considering this is a huge, 40-something page issue with a lot of good content as far as the action and a lot of good character development. It's a seminal Uncanny X-Men issue from the 90s.
Mm-hmm. I agree. All right, X-Men Volume 2, number 25. So the big thing happens. Magneto and Charles Xavier are finally going to two-man enter, one-man leave. Somebody's walking out. Somebody's walking out of Avalon with their wits about them, but not before some of the team suffer some pretty big blows, including one Wolverine. So what's funny is when I was reading this, I get into 25 and I'm like, oh man, I forgot all about Kubert doing this. And then we do the next issue, which is going to be Wolverine 75, and his brother Adam gets on there. Right. And I'm like, I'm trying to figure out which one I like the best, but either way, both of them are a treat. So anyway, the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, I love both the Kuberts as well. And I said earlier every issue had different artists, but it looks like Andy Kubert is all over this X-Men issue, and I think Adam Kubert is all over the Wolverine issue without any changeover. So I was a little off on that, but Kubert is awesome. Joe Kubert also good, legendary. But
did he have his own school?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think, what do you know?
But yeah, it was cool, especially in the early pages of this issue. We get to see how the rest of the greater Marvel U is being affected by this. Magneto at his most powerful basically unleashes an EMP worldwide. Mm-hmm. And we see some Fantastic Four. The Excalibur guys show up briefly. We hear references to how much damage it's doing worldwide, to the point where it's not just an X-Men thing anymore.
It's affecting the whole Marvel U.
Right. And we get Professor X walking around, which is the first time I think I'd ever seen that. In more modern X-Men comics, Professor X is no longer paralyzed, which is... I could go on and on about how bad the X-Men has been for the last 10 years, but I won't. But this is the first time I had seen him walking around, and we see some pretty cool, I assume Kubert designed yellow astronaut gear for the X-Men. He doesn't take the whole, group. He specifically picks out 6 X-Men to join him on the mission rather than taking, I would almost think he would be like a call to arms and bring X-Factor in.
Yeah, we're bringing everybody.
Maybe, how about Thor?
Yeah.
But I guess, especially at this time, the X-Men books were kind of their own thing. Spider-Man was kind of his own thing. You didn't see a whole lot of big crossovers unless it was like a big inter-company crossover like Secret Wars or whatnot.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But yeah, really good issue. It's cool seeing Magneto at his peak, basically. I don't think he's ever been this powerful before or since. He basically was one with the magnetic field of the Earth. And we get to see kind of some of the 90s, the top 90s X-Men, Gambit, Rogue, Wolverine in there. And it was a little disappointing that the Acolytes were pulled out of the action so quickly, but it just kind of set the stage for, it's just Magneto on his own.
Yeah, Magneto, you're thinking, well, Magneto may not have a chance here if he's got to face all of these. And it's neat how they lay out the plan. Like, Charles is saying, okay, I'm bringing you guys. We've got Wolverine and Gambit. You guys are the stealth. Yeah. And then we'll have the heavy hitters at first. And the only thing I need you to do is just open it up for me. And...
Never had a chance.
No, it didn't. It did not go. As soon as Magneto found out, it's just like there is no plan B, plan C, whatever. It's on. I think I might have pointed this out on the source material Facebook page, but I wondered if the code got involved here during this fight. There is a panel, or maybe it's just the issue I was reading. When Wolverine finally faces off with Magneto, and I don't know if he just uses both his claws, sets of claws, or whatever, but he tears into Magneto. And in the copy that I'm looking at, there's like, Magneto has a big X on his abdomen where Wolverine had cut him. Well, but it looks like he just cut his clothes.
Yeah, it looks like there should be some gore there or something.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if you look at the word balloons, I mean, he's like, he's like, Logan, you have done like this.
His guts are hanging out or something.
Yeah, you could tell he's feeling something, at least in the way he's talking. But there's nothing on the page, so I don't know if like code got in there and like, no, you guys can't be having somebody eviscerated
this isn't Bloodstrike. We're not.
No, and let's see, this is Marvel code. Yeah, I see the old box. The old box is up there. This is 90s Marvel. I can't remember when it was they finally just
said do away with the code until like the early 2000s, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Like 2002, right. Maybe.
So we're 10 years maybe behind that. Clearly it's a blow large enough to make they even say that Magneto's bleeding. You don't see it, but regardless, that does not take away from about what's to happen next. Right. And that's when Magneto lays him out. So I mean, you're reading this. Were you reading this? You said you went back, picked it up, and you read what happened after hearing about Wolverine and his and what happens to him here. What were your thoughts, man, when you were reading this?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't read it on its initial release, but probably within less than a year, I was able to track down the issue and read it then. And it's a great image. Props again to Andy Kubert, like Magneto kind of standing defiantly. Again, like in this particular splash page, you can't see the wounds. Magneto, it almost looks like he's not even been.
No, his shirt's back together.
The coloring is off to where it looks like he's got his full costume on. I think that was probably more of a coloring mistake.
Okay.
But he's just defiantly, holding up his fist, and all of the adamantium in liquid form is just oozing out of Wolverine, out of his pores, out of wounds all over his body. It even says in the captions that he doesn't have time to scream. It's instantly like almost kills him.
Yeah, and you're just watching it being pulled out of him. Now, up to this point in Wolverine's history, there was again another X-Man with a very
the original X-Man with a mysterious past, probably.
Exactly. Yeah, nobody knew what came before. I don't even know if they had even explored the fact that he'd been around for so long. He had this mysterious past, and they even in the next issue that we get into, they kind of Jean and Professor Xavier get into his head, and they kind of play with that as well. Like they're watching things that unfolded inside his head that really haven't even been shown in comic book history at the time. So anyway, we're watching this.
I think we knew how I kind of had an idea that, he was much older than you would think. I think maybe one of the old Marvel trading cards had like the "Did you know?"
Oh, really?
And was like, "Did you know Wolverine is actually over 100 years old?" or something like that.
Oh, wow!
And there was the Uncanny X-Men issue that Jim Lee did in probably 89 or 90, where Logan teamed up with Captain America in World War II before he was, which is kind of makes a little bit of a conundrum that he didn't have his claws in that story when we get to Wolverine 75.
Yeah,
but still, that's an icon, an issue I don't have, but it's a pretty iconic issue.
Yeah. So this happens in front of the whole team. Magneto just turns that metal into liquid and just rips it out of. He could make this probably have gone a little bit easier, but no.
Right, he probably could have done it in a way that wouldn't have nearly killed.
Yeah.
But that was the purpose. So
yeah, Wolverine's got a healing factor, so we're hoping that he can pull back from this. But it happens, like I said, right in front of his whole team. Just this metal just comes off of his bones, and this is his calling card. I mean, this when Wolverine was in any type of scrap, he had these metal-laced bones to fall back on and try and the unbreakable bones, basically.
Right, and unbreakable claws.
Yeah, so this is big things are happening here, and like I said, his team's traumatized watching this. Specifically, Charles Xavier. He just, at that point, he lets loose. He gets a hold of Magneto and he shuts him down. So the big event obviously is Wolverine and what he goes through here. But the other thing is Charles Xavier finally attempting to put an end to this.
Up to this point, Professor X was always sitting at the mansion, pulling the strings, sending them the team out on missions, whatnot. You didn't see him in action very often, or at least I hadn't. At this time, I'd only been reading for a few years, but you get a sense that he wasn't a soldier. He had the X-Men to do this kind of thing for him. But now his oldest, enemy has kind of gone off the deep end and is to a point where he is considered irredeemable, I guess. And you see the most powerful psychic, in the Marvel U, kind of unleash his powers on Magneto.
Yeah, I'll read the page here. No more, Magnus, no more. Logan shall be the last. No one else will suffer. You caused the deaths of hundreds today, Magnus. Deaths I could have prevented had I stopped you years ago. You have killed too many, Magnus. I have had enough. I will make sure here and now, once and for all, that you never kill again. And then Magneto's like, oh shit. I didn't think you'd go that far, man. His eyes go white and then he drops, but he's still alive. He just drops to the ground. I took away his greatest weapons, his hatred, his ego, his nightmares. I took them all. I took his mind away from him. God forgive me. That wipes Professor X out. Magneto's down for the count. Wolverine's down for the count. Like I said, now the X-Men are kind of like in recovery mode. Okay, just to kind of point this out here, at least this one panel, Jean has Wolverine in her arms.
Right.
Came off
the adamantium is like still flowing out, it looks like. Or maybe it's re-solidified.
That is bad news. I don't remember reading that in the next issue. I think it all is completely off.
If that's the case, I don't think there would be any way for them to pull the rest of it out of him. I don't know.
No, dude. I mean, that's no clue. Anyway, so as I said, Colossus sticks around and he's still staying with Magneto. Even though this battle went on and all this crazy stuff happened, Peter Rasputin has made the decision to still stay an acolyte and stay and serve Magneto's dream. So there we go. And everybody's off ship.
Props to Andy Kubert one more time for that depiction of Colossus, because that's a badass Colossus standing over Magneto there.
It is. And there are quite a few panels throughout here where I'm just like, this is classic Andy. 90s comics, I think that is the most familiar I am with artists, and for good reason. Yeah. Obviously, it was the boom for them at that point in time. So I could tell immediately, oh, that's Kubert art, or that's McFarlane, that's Liefeld. Yeah. And so again, another signature here. So all right, here we go. Wolverine Volume 2, number 75. Like I said, the X-Men have retreated off Avalon. They have a wounded Wolverine there. The title of this issue is Nightmares Persist. Writer Larry Hama and pencil Adam Kubert here. A bloody and beaten Wolverine has fallen into shock, while Jean and Xavier head into Wolverine's mind to try and keep him from dying. Wolverine's healing factor is having a really hard time fixing him up, and compounding that, the return shuttle they are in is falling apart upon re-entry. It is clear Jean has issues with what Xavier has done with Magneto, and has reservations of actually being inside Wolverine's mind as well. While the chaos causes both of them to go in and out of Wolverine's head, Xavier actually has to go in there at one point and psychically it's represented physically, grab Logan as he is about to actually succumb to death itself. There's a point where Logan is like going towards the light, and Xavier is in there grabbing him by the ankle. And what's interesting about that, I didn't put that in my notes, but what I thought was interesting about that was Illyana, Peter's Colossus' sister, shows up, and he's like, hey, darling, I'm ready to go. And she actually pushes Wolverine back.
Right.
So during this, the shuttle decompresses and a hatch is blown open, nearly sucking Jean Grey outside. Barely hanging on as she is about to come free, Wolverine gets up somehow and grabs her hand and saves her from falling out of the plane. We skip ahead, and Wolverine is, we're back on ground. This is clearly a few days afterwards. We don't really get to see Wolverine recover a whole lot. I mean, they get him down to, I think it's Muir Island?
Yeah.
Might be. But anyway, he's healed enough, and he feels up to actually testing himself in the Danger Room. So the Danger Room, ladies and gentlemen, is basically a big playground where the X-Men can hone their skills, and they can create threats and robots and all this crazy stuff. So Wolverine's like, I'm ready. Let me go in. Here we go. in the midst of the battle, Wolverine looks beat until he does something that none of them expect. The schnicked turns into shucked, and out pops Wolverine's claws. Only this time, they are bone. Without his adamantium-laced skeleton, Wolverine feels as if he may not have anything left to offer the team, and he decides soon after to leave the mansion to try and find his place in the world. All right, we're coming back to that. Let me finish this next synopsis, and we'll definitely come back to that. That's huge. So the next issue, Excalibur number 71. Now, what could possibly be left? I mean, Wolverine has been injured, gravely injured, and he's actually healed up enough, and he leaves the X-Men. Magneto's practically brain dead. So Excalibur 71, titled "Crossing Swords," or as I like to call this, get this, Colossal Intervention. Writer Scott Lobdell, penciler Ken W. Lashley, which that's an artist I'm not familiar with. I never read Excalibur, so I think his art's fine. I can just tell you that much. I'm just surprised I didn't recognize his name. But when you're dealing in 90s artists with all the Kuberts and Quesadas, it's kind of tough. Ken W. Lashley. So Excalibur, here's the team, ladies and gentlemen. Nightcrawler, Kitty Pryde, or Shadowcat, as she's known, and Phoenix, which, okay. Phoenix is Scott and Jean's daughter from an alternate timeline, okay? So how's that? She came back to the past. Okay, so Excalibur are joined on Muir Isle by X-Men Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Professor Xavier. Their plea is for their assistance in trying to lure Colossus from the Acolytes in order to try to correct some head trauma that Xavier says should have been corrected before the previous run-in with Magneto. But in order to do this, Xavier convinces Kitty to deceive her longtime friend and former lover, Colossus. During this, a fixed-up Cable. Cable's back. He's back, ladies and gentlemen. He's feeling good. He's all back together. A fixed-up Cable has decided to become involved and plans to make Magneto and the Acolytes pay for the shape he was left in during their last battle. When Cable attempts to strike, Rachel Summers, a.k.a. Phoenix, a.k.a. Cable's potentially alternate timeline sister, stops him dead in his tracks. After getting a video from Kitty saying that she wished to join him on Avalon, Colossus finally beams down and is ambushed by what he used to consider as his friends. Subduing Colossus and taking him to a medical facility, the other Acolytes appear to try to take Colossus back. Vogt, Katu, and Uniscion are all met by Nightcrawler. While under the medical procedure, Colossus comes clean about his regret of failing his sister Illyana, but plans to make it right. When he is finally able to get up and apparently healed, Colossus goes outside just as the Acolytes and Excalibur and X-Men are in the heat of battle, and he stops the fight. Colossus tells everyone that he plans on staying with the Acolytes on Avalon to help further Magneto's dream, but to do it in a different fashion, and he leaves his friends behind. This leads Nightcrawler and the rest of Excalibur to decide to stay on Muir Isle, marking a new direction for the team of Excalibur. So, okay, that's the end of Fatal Attractions right there. So let's skip back. Let's talk about 75. Big event. I mean, right there is definitely Wolverine and his bone claws. I just want to hop over to Facebook real quick because and then I'm going to give you the floor. But I posted the picture, the panel of when Wolverine pops his claws at the end of that fight.
For the first time.
For the first time since his adamantium has been ripped from his body. And we all find out that he actually still has the claws and they're actually bone. I shared the picture. And we've got a few comments that I thought were interesting. One guy says, I remember up to this point, it was assumed they were just adamantium claws, which is yes, that's right. What I did. I mean, I assumed that when he went through the whole
Weapon X, yeah.
When he went through the whole Weapon X thing, they put those claws in them. And so this guy says, he assumed they were just adamantium claws, which was a pretty cool addition to the mythos. Got to agree there. Another person says, part of a great storyline with Wolverine doing a lot of soul searching after tangling with Magneto. I don't think I've read much of Wolverine after this. Well, really up to this. I have a few issues, but I know he was off doing his own thing. And I know some of the iterations of Wolverine that occur after this, specifically No-Nose Beast Mode.
Yeah.
But, I can't say that I've read them, so I don't know. But a lot of people say that, or this guy's saying that the storyline after this in Wolverine seemed to be pretty good. And then the next guy says, the next 30 or 40 issues are really, really good. So last but not least, this guy, he says, one of the most shocking comic panels of the 90s.
Yeah, I remember when I went back and read this, I'm pretty sure I didn't read issues Wolverine 75 until years later, after I'd kind of gotten out of comics for a couple years and gotten back into it. And I was a little surprised that it's almost entirely Professor X and Jean in Wolverine's psyche trying to keep him alive, basically, trying to keep him from giving up on life and letting his body fail. But there's also a really cool kind of side story with them just trying to keep the ship together long enough to get back to Earth, which is it's falling apart. Constantly Professor X is having to tell Jean, hey, hold this together, keep our compatriots from flying out the hatch that's broken open. So it's super chaotic, and Andy Kubert Adam Kubert is the artist on this one, and he's not. You asked in our messages beforehand, to pick your favorite.
You got to pick your favorite.
Kubert.
Pick it.
And I would say at this time, when I was younger, I would have said Adam Kubert was my favorite. I really like, especially a lot of the stuff he did on Spirits of Vengeance, which is one of the Midnight Suns titles. It was a Ghost Rider spin-off title, basically. Mm-hmm. He had some really great art in those issues, and he was a little more 90s. He was really more energetic, it feels like, than Andy Kubert is. Andy Kubert is more traditional storytelling, really capable, and has a lot of really great imaging. But Adam Kubert is a lot more energetic, and he plays around a lot more with panels. In this issue, with him doing a lot of stuff in Wolverine's mind, he can kind of go crazy. He really goes nuts with some of these splash pages and stuff. So at this time, I was more of an Adam Kubert fan, although I love both guys. Nowadays, his work looks a little sloppier to me.
Is he doing stuff for DC or
he does. Him and Adam and Andy both went to DC at one point, probably about 10 years ago. And I want to say Andy is still doing DC stuff, but I think Adam Kubert has been back doing mostly Marvel stuff lately. I can't swear to it. I can't remember the last thing I read that they worked on.
While we're talking about the art, do you have the cover there in front of you?
No, but I'm familiar with what it.
Okay, I mean, I wish I could do it justice because if I would have seen this on the newsstand, I mean, I would have bought it. Yeah. I don't know why I don't have this. I don't know why I didn't have this issue and bought it immediately. Wolverine 75. If you look at just the front cover, now remember, folks, it's a wraparound cover. So the back, unfold the comic, and the front and back cover are all one glorious picture. But Wolverine is just laid out. Number one, he looks like a demon from hell. He looks like something from fucking John Carpenter film or something. I mean, it looks scary. Not only that, but the only thing he's wearing is his underwear or trunks. There are just hundreds of spikes ranging from at least 3 feet long to an inch long and they're not silver, which is what takes me by by surprise. You would expect it to all be silver kind of jutting out of his body, but no, what it is, they're all flesh colored. So it's like the adamantium is coming off of him, but it's not breaking his skin at this time.
Right.
Oh, it just looks painful.
It's just gross.
It is bad. And of course, the X-Men are, in utter disbelief as to what's happening before their eyes. But man, oh man. So yeah, I like your description of Adam being more energetic. And I will tell you that, yeah, if I'm to pick, I would have picked Adam because his stuff it captures that emotion of what's going on at that time, at least a little bit better in my opinion.
Yeah, the issue itself, it's a lot of chaos reigns. There's Jean and Professor X are have invaded Wolverine's mind, trying to keep him together. Jean is constantly criticizing everything Professor's doing. We don't have the right to do this. She says the same thing about Magneto. Yeah, she's probably right, but at the same time, it's like it's this or he dies. Mm-hmm. So,
I can't blame Professor X for what he's doing here. I mean, right. He's got to do something, and he's even in a weakened state after he laid out Magneto. He's weakened pretty badly. Right. So there's panels that make throughout Wolverine's mindscape, he looks like he's just made of rubber.
Yeah, right.
He's just like his fingers are all flopping. There's no bones in him whatsoever. And granted, that's probably how he perceives himself now, because he's just an actual person with an actual skeleton.
And there's the Illyana, the angel, who he sees as Illyana, kind of pushes him away and sends him back, to his corporal form. And we kind of lose track of what's going on with him until we see it coincides with what's going on inside the ship, where Jean is hanging on for dear life, has kind of been pulled out of the hatch that's broken loose. And it's Wolverine who has kind of come back to his senses and saves her, pulls her back in the ship.
Yeah, there's always been that, right now, Scott and Jean, Scott Summers, Jean Grey, they're obviously, in some timeline they have a daughter, and some timeline they had a son, and they're a couple, but Wolverine and Jean have always had that, they've always had that attraction to each other, it seems like. And now there were mentions about the Dark Phoenix saga, if I remember right. I think Scott says that, she's about to fall off the plane, not again. But yeah, Wolverine getting up against all odds.
Right.
Against all the stuff that's happened to him. He's the guy that gets up and is able to grab a hold of her and save her. That speaks a lot to the resolve of Wolverine. He just beat death, and as soon as he beat death, he did it in order to save his love, I guess you would say. So, all right. I mean, in that panel where they're in the danger room and he pops his claws, that was... I remember hearing just rumors of that, and I think I remember picking up this issue and reading it, when I was a kid, and just going, it did spin the whole character in a new direction. This guy has actual bone claws. Oh my gosh,
I'm not sure what led to the animalistic, no nose Wolverine.
Yeah.
But just the idea of the same basic Wolverine, except he doesn't have the adamantium. It makes him more vulnerable. At times it seems like he's too powerful with that healing factor and with the adamantium, bones and everything. That might have been a way from them to humanize him a little bit more.
Yeah, he's got the healing factor, but his bones are now breakable. He can't be just jumping in, or there's no fastball specials that's going to be happening anytime soon. That's not in the old move book anymore. So it can't be understated enough about how the hell and back that this guy had gone through, and then I mean that panel with him and just screaming towards that he's in such pain,
blood pouring out of his
dude. Now that is great visual imagery right there. The people are, the rest of the team are like, oh my gosh, get the blood. I can't remember what the hell they were saying. Stop the bleeding. Right.
This is 93, and he stays that way until 99. So there's a good 6-year run of Wolverine stories, including the Marvel vs. DC crossover, a lot of big events, Onslaught, like all that stuff. That's Bone Claw, Wolverine.
That's right.
Going through all those big stories, and he would come back. I think it was issue 125, maybe 150, maybe 200. I can't remember. Big anniversary issue Eric Larson, I think, wrote the issue, and maybe Lionel Yu was the artist. I remember that it was the first comic in years that I think that had cover enhancement, where they made the claws silver on the cover. Ooh. To kind of commemorate, him getting his adamantium back. I think Apocalypse gave him his adamantium back in a storyline late 90s. For a long time it was Bone Claw Wolverine, and that was the status quo that came out of this book. With the exception of Age of Apocalypse, of course, where he had the adamantium back, but he only had one hand.
Yeah, he only had one hand, and then, of course, that all faded to black soon after that. Right. Yeah, okay, so Excalibur 71, their potential attempt to try and, again, get Colossus to come back to the team. It's tough to kind of follow up Wolverine 75.
It's almost like an epilogue issue.
Yeah, you've got... there's still kind of some unsaid stuff out there with Colossus leading the Acolytes, and this is like their last-ditch effort to try and bring this guy back, and it fails.
It was kind of cool, I guess, that despite them, fixing his brain injury or whatever was going on with that, like, he still chose to stay on Asteroid M.
Yes, even after they fixed his head.
Right, he wasn't just going to jump right back to the X-Men. There was... it wasn't going to be wrapped up in a little bow. There was still that doubt with him basically as an enemy is how it's left.
It was kind of their way of teasing. Like, hey, this is his problem. Here's his problem. We're going to fix this and everything will be just fine. I think that adds some depth to the story. It really solidifies the fact that Colossus has an issue with the way Professor Xavier has been handling things and trying to, he feels that he's ineffectual. So
he's lost his faith in the Xavier way.
Yeah, a lobotomy or fixing a lobotomy or whatever the hell, it's not changing him, and it's shaken him to his core to where he is steadfast in his resolve that he is not going to be part of Xavier's way of doing things anymore. It's kind of really all that issue is to say, hey, Colossus is gone. He's not going to be. And I remember him being part of the Acolytes for a few stories after this.
Yeah, I'm not sure when he really comes back. I know eventually he's an X-Man again, but I can't remember. It may have even been all the way up to when he sacrifices himself. Eventually, he sacrifices himself to...
That's right.
...provide a cure for the legacy virus, and maybe he was an Acolyte until then. I'm not certain.
That's right. Can we just talk about him and Kitty Pryde's relationship? Just recently, because I think I'd heard just recently they were going to get married. Here's the thing. They built it as this huge marriage. There was going, finally, they're going to tie the knot, and guess what happens? They don't tie the knot. So their relationship has been off and on. It's always been kind of like this innocent relationship, but in this one, she kind of another thing is that he probably feels betrayed by what Kitty Pryde did here.
Yeah, for sure.
I wouldn't want to be around that. If she did that to me, I would understand. Well, what do you have left? Look at what you guys did just now.
Yeah.
So
real quick on the art, you mentioned Ken Lashley.
Yeah.
Who is fine. He's capable. I know I've read other stuff. His name sounds familiar to me, but I can't place what he worked on that I've read before. But it's also Darick Robertson, who I am a fan of, and I really like early Darick Robertson, like this era, and he did some Ultraverse stuff. He did New Warriors for a while. His art is a little cartoony, I guess, for lack of a better word, but I really like his early stuff, and he does a good job in this. It's another one of those things where they switch
That's what I was going to ask.
Forth throughout the issue, so you almost have to really look at the faces really closely to tell who's doing what, which pages. It flows pretty well, honestly, but just wanted to throw out a little love to Darick Robertson because I really like his 90s, early 2000s. He's not that I hate his more recent stuff. I just prefer some of his earlier stuff.
Well, what's messed up here is I pulled this off of Mike's Mike's Amazing World of Comics. So it says writer Scott Lobdell, penciler Ken Lashley. Now I'm looking at the inside of the issue here. It does say Ken Lashley, Darick Robertson, and then Matthew Ryan.
Okay, yeah.
Matthew Ryan. Before we get into our own final thoughts here, I do want to. We were going to have another guest on here. He unfortunately couldn't make it. His name is Evan Bevins. He's been on a few shows in the past with me, and Evan he told me a story, so I figured I'd go ahead and relay it here about Fatal Attraction. I think at one point he says he was reading a magazine months in advance before Fatal Attractions happened, and he read in the magazine that Wolverine was going to get his adamantium pulled out. Also said he got one of the holograms signed by one of the Kubert brothers.
That's cool.
He says he feels disappointment seeing those issues in bargain bins at cons. He asked me if I ever heard of who came up with the idea to pull the adamantium out of Wolverine. And I said, no, I did not. He said to Google it, find out if he's right, which I did not do, but I don't care. He says the story goes that when the writers were meeting to discuss the event, Peter David, who was writing X Factor at the time, jokingly said, why doesn't Magneto just pull all the metal out of Wolverine's body? Right. And he says he doesn't remember what magazine he got that spoiled it. It was some kind of comic book publication he'd never got before or after, but it laid out the whole thing months in advance before the issues even came out.
Wow.
And he even said that they revealed the bone claws in that article as well. And I was like, wow, that's that's crazy. So anyway, shout out to Evan Bevins. I'm sure he'll probably give this a listen. I'm sorry I couldn't have him on the podcast tonight. I know he wanted to be on here. So all right, here's a few reactions because I'd posted that we were going to be talking about this storyline in, I think it was on Unspoken Decade, I think is where I put it at. Unspoken Decade's Facebook page. One guy says the adamantium getting pulled out, unforgettable. One guy said it was kind of so he wasn't too impressed. All right, well, whatever. Another guy says he bought all of the issues. People are still buying them and are affordable and actually brisk movers in the bins. Cool gimmick with the covers. I agree. I love the hologram stuff. Amazing story. Love the covers. This is seriously one of my favorite all-time story arcs. And now this guy, it was really interesting what he said. He said, this is about where I dropped all X title. After 6 years of reading, incomprehensible stories, forgettable characters, and mostly confusing art. Gotta say I disagree. I didn't have a hard time following this. You said at the beginning you didn't either, did you?
No, I mean, you don't know everything, but it's not like... I mean, it gives you what you need to follow the story.
Yeah. Another person says, I love the crossover. I hate that we never got the Shi'ar/mutant hybrid origin for Exodus like Lobdell wanted to do. I didn't know about that. Awesome crossover from start to finish. It wasn't crazy big like some other X events, so things didn't get convoluted. A lot of big changes, but they all seemed organic. That's about it. One guy says he really liked the Magneto hologram. So, but yeah, some great feedback from some great people there on the UnspokenDecade.com. Love to hear what they had to say about the Fatal Attractions crossover. So, Chris, I'll leave it to you. What's your final thoughts here, man?
I mean, it's in the 90s, the X-Men were the biggest thing in comics, it seemed like, for almost the whole decade, pretty much from Jim Lee's and Chris Claremont's X-Men #1 through Age of Apocalypse and Onslaught, all the crossovers in the early 90s through basically 2000 when the movie hit. X-Men was always like the premier franchise that Marvel had, and, Marvel is the biggest company. Yeah. Even then. This fits right in. It's the one from the previous year, the Executioner's Song. This was not the same. You didn't have to get every issue. It was basically just an anniversary of the X-Men, so they threw, the holograms and all the covers, and they were all kind of loosely connected for a month. But you didn't have to get them all in the same way, like a lot of crossovers lead from one part into the next. But yeah, it's kind of Fatal Attractions is maybe the biggest one simply because of the page count and the events that are so huge, like the Wolverine getting his adamantium ripped out, Professor X shutting down Magneto's, brain, and the return of Magneto, because he had been gone for a couple of years. So a lot of big events going on in there, a lot of stuff, the return of Cable to X-Force, like it's kind of a, nonstop one big moment towards the next.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. I'm looking through the events here, and I'm just kind of focused on, mutant-related events throughout the 90s. That's on this Wikipedia page. Fatal Attractions is up there. The only other thing that I can think of that might possibly be up there with it would be Age of Apocalypse.
Sure. Yeah.
Age of Apocalypse. I was almost going to say Onslaught, but boy, does that turn into something crazy. Jeez,
and there's a lot more like Onslaught has.
That touched everything.
It has every other character basically in the MCU involved.
Yeah, that touched everything, which is fine. But I mean, when it comes to like, if you want a mutant-related, solid 6-issue story, especially about the events. I mean, Age of Apocalypse was great, but really, what did we get out of that? X-Man,
right?
And Dark Beast. So
that was pretty much a self-contained, event as well. You just had to read. You could kind of pick and choose which of those series it was going on to read, and they all kind of were all their own thing.
But, I don't think we actually mentioned this yet, but, what happens in this event, just like you were talking about, where he shuts down Magneto's brain, this affects Charles Xavier, at least it's the beginning of what occurs in Onslaught. This starts a chain of events in Professor Xavier that results in one of the biggest villains the Marvel Universe had ever seen in Onslaught. So at some point, I think we had Onslaught on the schedule, and then Mark Radlich said, I can't read that much. I was like, I know, dude, it's like 6. There's like 4. I know there's 4 solid trades.
Yeah, that's another one that I think there's a lot of like tertiary material that you don't really have to read. You basically read the Onslaught X-Men, which kind of starts it, and then you can kind of cherry pick which issues in between to read, and then Onslaught Marvel Universe is the last issue. I think it's doable. One thing about that I was going to mention when we did X-Men 25, when it came time to do Onslaught, years later, I think it was Mark Waid who initially came up with the idea, like, let's have Professor X be the bad guy. That was going to be the twist and the reveal. But editorial, which was notoriously protective of the X-Men franchise in the 90s, they were like, we can't do that. That's Professor X is the patriarch. We can't have him be, become the evil villain. So they had to kind of wedge the Magneto's influence into it. Like, when he shut Magneto's brain down, he took a piece of Magneto with him, and that grew into Onslaught eventually, which does kind of make sense as a story. It didn't bother me or anything. Mark Waid hated it from what I've read.
Oh, really?
Because they took his idea and he thought that they really watered it down by doing that.
Oh, man. If you take Professor X and you send him down that road without that bit of Magneto or without that bit, that's that's going to be a tough road to come back from.
Right. He can't bring him back.
No way.
But Onslaught was a huge deal, even more so probably than this, because it involved so many other characters. It led to Heroes Reborn, that was huge stuff.
So this is like this is that little part.
That sort of came from Fatal Attractions.
Yeah, that's great. Well, hot damn, man, I had a great time. I was excited all day wanting to talk about this. When Dean bowed out, I was like, oh damn. And then of course you had your internet issues. Like, oh man, I really want to talk this tonight. But I had a great time. So yeah, man, a lot of fun. And we didn't this isn't tied in with anything. Normally we tie stuff in. Mark, I think, is getting ready to go do some fun stuff, like on a cruise or something. So he's like, you just, do a couple weeks without me. I'm like, well, cool. It's going to be 90s comics. That's going to happen. I'm glad I got you on here to talk about it with me. So, then I think, yeah, man, absolutely. I think that this brings our coverage of X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force, Excalibur, and Fatal Attractions to a close. So let's go ahead and get into plugs here, sir. I mean, is there anything you, Chris, would like to plug right now?
You've already mentioned the Unspoken Decade, which is a 90s comics fan site. Basically, go there, check out. I know Jesse has had a great Ultra Force cartoon, experiencing the Ultra Force cartoon article a few weeks ago that you guys should check out. Don't be imposed by the length. I couldn't believe that when I went up to the top and I hit the reader icon and it said 20 to 23 minutes. I was like, holy shit! I wrote that long of an article. Did not realize that was the case. It's a deep dive into 13 episodes. So
yes, it is.
A lot of content there to go over. But that's cool. And I'm I'm always working on stuff to put on there. I haven't put anything up there in a while, but there are other contributors that do good stuff there. Their Facebook page is awesome, so you can like their Facebook page, The Unspoken Decade.
Very good, very good. All right, well, I'll throw the old can plugs in here at the end. You can go back in the archives, check out me and Mark talking about Flock of Flurkins on the Captain Marvel podcast. We did higher, further, faster, something. Anyway, it's the first volume of Captain Marvel from 2014. You can check that out. The big movie just dropped there last week. Then Damn You Hollywood is scheduled to do coverage of the Captain Marvel movie on the 12th, so you can probably catch that late on the 12th or the morning of Wednesday the 13th. And then Mark Radulich is heading into the world of anime. By the behest of one Robert Winfrey, they are going on TV Party Tonight, the 14th, and they're discussing the series, I think it's season 1 of One Punch Man. So, for Chris Armstrong, I'm Jesse Starcher. Thank you all for joining us here on this 200-plus episode of Source Material. It's been a fun 2 hours. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.